Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Temple Israel. We're so glad to be here for our Discovering Our History Forum on Akron's Jewish history. And we are especially glad to be in this beautiful space and working with such an amazing panel. We want to, of course, send our greatest condolences and prayers to Rabbi Brown, who is dealing with a bit of a back issue, of which many of us know much about those kinds of things, but hopefully he will be back with all of us soon. We are so glad to be in this space for our History Forum. For those of you who have followed the bicentennial, this is History Forum number 14 of the year, and we've got 2 more left. So consider yourself in rarefied company. We are really looking forward to our upcoming events, of which I'll share a little more information about them at the end of this forum. We want to also remind you that if you have not, we have extra copies of our bicentennial magazine. You can find one outside in the lobby, so please pick one up. Or if you have someone who you'd like to share a copy with, we have extras. And then also our upcoming Akron Bicentennial concert, which is going to be December 3rd, a Wednesday. Admission is totally free, and we're going to be with the Akron Symphony Orchestra at E.J. Thomas. It'll be all Akron performers and or composers. And I'll also be on the program a bit too. So we want to hopefully see all of you join with us at that time. I'm really happy to introduce tonight's moderator. A couple of instructions for the forum. All of you should have picked up an index card when you came in. These are our question cards. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the panel discussion. And so please write your questions down. Please write legibly, and so we don't have to screen out your questions. And we will then answer those questions with the panel at the end of tonight's forum. So at this time, I'm very happy to introduce Mike Butlin, and he is the chair of the 160th Anniversary History Committee here at Temple Israel Akron. So please help us welcome Mike.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's nice to see everybody here. A lot of familiar faces from Temple, obviously, and a lot of not so familiar faces. So to those of you who I don't recognize, a special welcome. I'm glad you're here. Let me start by introducing our panel. We've got 3 pretty amazing people here who have some great stories to tell you. Immediately to my left, you're right, is Lois Raven. Lois has been a continual member of Temple since the 1930s and is really our unofficial historian at Temple. If it happened at Temple, she knows about it. An amazing wealth of knowledge, so Lois is truly a treasure for us. Next to Lois is Joelle Zoman. Joelle is, we wanted to bring her in just for a little younger, more millennial perspective. She works on the history committee with me. She also works for Akron200. And I don't want to steal her thunder, but she'll be able to speak quite a bit about the connection and sort of how this all came to be. Finally, on the far left is Art Krakauer. Art is a former Temple president, extremely active in Temple life with a particular passion really for community connections, social justice, interfaith relations, things like that. So Art will absolutely have a lot to share about that. So please welcome our panel. Okay, so 1865 is when this all started. On April 9th, 1865, General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox, okay? 1 week before that, 1 week before Appomattox, Temple Israel was founded. On April 2nd, 1865, Akron, which was really at the time a small canal town, maybe 7,000 people. There were 20 Jewish men in the town. Most of them were merchants and peddlers. All of them were of German descent. And the men gathered, wrote a constitution and for a religious organization, and they named it the Akron Hebrew Association. Okay? 160 years later, we don't call ourselves the Akron Hebrew Association anymore. We go by Temple Israel Akron, but the commonality is we're still Akron. And that's always been an important part of our existence here. Our connection to Akron, learning about each other's differences, and the things that kind of tie us together. Temple Israel has always been very, very involved in the Akron community, and we always will be. It's really one of our standards. So going back to 1865, like I said, it was a small canal town. The Akron Hebrew Association originally met in a one-room, basically office on the second floor of a building on Howard Street. That's where it all started, in one room. Over the next few years, they went to other places, trying to find a more permanent home, something a little larger. So they relocated to another place on Howard Street. Unfortunately, neither of those buildings exist anymore. They were located on the part of Howard Street. If you're all Akron history buffs, you may know that Howard Street has been rerouted a little bit, and we were on the rerouted stretch of street. So there is no, unfortunately, I can't point to a building and say that's where it all started. I probably could point to a parking lot or something like that. Temple got its first permanent home in the 1880s, and what happened was the congregation purchased the former St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which was on High Street. And that was really Temple's first permanent home. It was sort of informally called the High Street Temple. That was where this congregation lived for about 26 years until 1911, when a plot of land was purchased on Merriman Road. And that's where we spent basically the next 101 years, on Merriman Road. We moved here in 2013, I believe, 2014. And we assume we're going to be here a long time because we're definitely thriving. So that's kind of a little bit about where we've come from. I wanted to ask Lois a few questions, just because, like I said, she really is our historian. So Lois, just thinking back to some of those early days, obviously you weren't here in the 19th century.
No.
But when you were growing up, where did Jewish people tend to live originally?
Okay. Well, my notes are, I don't know if you can hear me. When the Jews first came to Akron, which was the 1880s in Temple, Israel, most of the German Jewish people lived somewhere, think of Bowery Street, West Exchange, West Market, to what is now Highland Square. The German Jews all, and they came from Hungary, Romania, but they were merchants, and that's where they tended to live. And then about the 1890s, the early 1900s, the Jewish settlers came from Poland and Latvia and the countries up in that part of Eastern Europe. And they settled mostly on the Worcester Avenue area. They went east about as far as Maple Street, north to about Euclid Avenue, and south to about Rhodes Avenue. So that whole area was one side of the Jewish community, and the other side was the other side, is the only way I can put it. And the Jews that lived on, the German Jews were mostly merchants. They had furniture stores, they had clothing stores. The ones that lived on the Worcester Avenue side, they were bakers, tailors, the kosher butchers, although my grandfather had a kosher butcher shop on Bowery Street, which is now the parking deck. And so that's basically, there were a few Jewish people that lived like out in East Akron. If they had a scrap yard or some kind of a business like that, they tended to live near the scrap yard for protection of the property, and also because of transportation. They could get to their business. They may not have had a car, but if they lived by their business, that was where so that's where the Jewish community was at the beginning.
Okay, so the original Jewish community was primarily from Germany. The next wave came in 1880s,
Yeah,
1890s.
About the 1890s, the 1900s.
And they tended to be more from Eastern Europe,
Yeah.
is what you said. So were their backgrounds different, the German
Very
Jews
different.
versus the Eastern Europeans?
Very different. The German Jews and the Hungarian Jews were much more educated. Many of them had already had what we might call a college degree, or they knew business. The ones that lived in the Worcester Avenue area tended to maybe have finished grade school. Most of them could not read or write English for a long time. I have my grandmother's application for citizenship, and they came here in about 1910, and she applied for citizenship in 1939, and she still could not read or write English. So where you had to put your signature, there's an X and a witness that signed her certificate. But primarily, those that lived in the Worcester Avenue area were not well educated. But they learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us how the Jewish community has migrated over the years. So you mentioned, there was a Worcester Avenue group, there was the group around Market Street.
Right.
What happened after that?
Okay, in about 1929, a group of the German Jews, the West Side Jews, decided to build the Akron Jewish Community Center, and it opened in 1929. And with the Jewish Community Center, the community started to come together a little bit because there was a center. Bethel had their original congregation in the Jewish Center building.
And I'm sorry, Lois. Where was the original Jewish Center?
On Balch Street. The big building on Balch Street. And so I don't know how to explain it, but somehow or another, the Jewish Center brought the two sides together. Because at one point, as I said, it was one and it was the other. And so that became the blending of the West Side and the Worcester Avenue side. And there were programs. Okay, Hadassah would have a program, but instead of meeting in a home, they met at the Jewish Center, Council of Jewish Women. There was some men's group. And once they started coming together, it was pretty good. And we, as the kids, we had a good time going to the center. Wednesday night was club night, and the big treat that was, we all laughed, Krispy Kreme donuts had opened. And Krispy Kreme donuts knew when the center programs for the kids were ending. And so we could walk down to Krispy Kreme, and they would have hot donuts ready for us. So that was a big treat.
Nice.
And then what else happened was the Akron Public Schools made a huge difference. because they started to build in West Akron. At one point, it was Rankin School and Portage Path, and then King School came in there too. But once the Akron Public Schools started to move west, the Jews that lived on the west side were already on the west side. The ones that were on Worcester Avenue moved up. Schumacher School got built, Rankin School was built, and then later on, Simon Perkins, and then when Buchtel opened in around 1932, 33, something like that.
32.
What?
1932.
1932. First it was Buchtel because Akron schools went K through 8. So when Buchtel opened, it was like the Jews all moved. They were going to the new high school. And then Perkins opened, so then the Jewish people moved further west towards Copley Road and Hawkins Avenue. And then when Litchfield and Firestone opened, everybody, I really don't know of any Jewish families that were really left on Worcester Avenue. And the ones that had lived in the Highland Square area, they moved west, further west, so that they could either be they were already in the Buchtel district, but they moved further west so they could be in the Firestone district. And now, guess where we are? We're not on Marin Road anymore.
Yeah.
We're west too.
And, and it's really sort of a classic story because what Lois described here in Akron, multiply that by any city in America. Just that story of migration and integration and kind of scattering out. I mean, there is no Jewish neighborhood really anymore. Here, we've got congregants who live in Wadsworth, Medina, Copley, Bath, a lot from West Akron, of course. But it just shows how the community is scattered. And that's just a sort of a classic immigrant story that's really happened with a lot of immigrant groups.
Well, the other thing that happened was Beth El left the Jewish Center on Bald Street, and they moved up to, they moved, I think in the 1950s, they moved to their building on Hawkins Avenue. So again, they moved. And then they later now have moved to the JCC on White Pond Drive. And originally Bethel was an Orthodox congregation. And when they moved to Hawkins Avenue, they became a conservative congregation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Lois, I know you take a lot of pride in claiming you're the only person around here who can remember Rabbi Alexander.
Oh, yes.
Rabbi Alexander was one of we've had a number of prominent rabbis over the years. Rabbi Alexander, who was our rabbi, I believe between 1919 and 1944, was one of our longest serving rabbis. So Lois, tell us a little bit about what life at Temple was with Rabbi Alexander at the time.
There's a few of us around. I saw Harvey come in.
Is Harvey there? Oh, there he is.
Yeah, Harvey knew Rabbi Alexander too. And it was classical reform, no Hebrew except for the Baruch Hu, the Shema, and the Yortzeit prayer. No Hebrew was taught in Sunday school, and he was very, very formal. And I don't know how you could even say, it was like, we used to think he was like talking to God or somebody, because he just didn't have I don't know of a really good relationship that he had with congregants, and definitely not with the students. And you had to the girls had to have dresses and the boys had to have jackets, and the services were long, and I think the sermons were even longer. But it was very, I'm going to use the term very cut and dried. There was no, no warmth. The nicest person I can remember was his wife, who was my kindergarten teacher, my first grade teacher. She was wonderful. And I'm almost positive, he and Irene are buried at Glendale Cemetery. So that was Rabbi Alexander.
Okay, so really probably our next really prominent rabbi after Rabbi Alexander was Rabbi Applebaum.
No, Rabbi Taxay came in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna skip over Rabbi
Okay.
Taxay just because
Well-
of time.
Well,
Nothing
no,
against Rabbi
no,
Taxay.
no, I'm going to give you one quick thing. Rabbi Taxay was an orator, and if he was speaking, there was never an empty seat in the congregation on a Friday night, or if he was giving a talk, there was never an empty seat. That was him.
So then Rabbi Applebaum came in, I think
Yes.
around 1953,
Yeah.
and he maybe was the most significant rabbi in our history.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about why he was so special?
Well, when he came, of course, he came really when I was already out of high school and had started college. But he was not a classical reform. He brought Hebrew into the school. He still had the decorum, and the girls still had to wear dresses, and the boys had to wear jackets and everything. But he was the first rabbi who I think could start to work with the congregants more. And one of the big things that he did as a social thing was on Rosh Hashanah afternoon, he and his wife had an open house for all the congregants to come, and they did. He started Hebrew school. We had Hebrew school, enough kids to have a Saturday classes and Sunday classes, and a midweek Hebrew. That was very, very different. And he also started to work with the community more than the other rabbis as far as the interfaith was going. But he did stick to the fact that there would be he brought in bar mitzvahs, but no bat mitzvahs. Girls had what they called a Benot Torah, and they had to do it as a group. But a couple other things. We had a cantor, which we had never had before. And he's the one that started our youth interfaith services, which are still going today.
Right.
And he invited, talked to the churches, and the children would come, and it would be their 10th grade or 11th grade. And then after the service was over, did a regular service, and when the service was over, everybody was invited to come to the Bima to see the Torah, and he would explain, and he'd have answer questions for that. And then two other things that Rabbi Applebaum did that were very unique. One was he was a historian, and he saved everything that was ever printed from the temple, the bulletins, the yearbooks, everything, and sent them to Cincinnati, which is the Hebrew Union College, and they were all digitized. So if you want to find out anything while Rabbi Applebaum was here, it's all in Cincinnati. And the other thing that Rabbi Applebaum started, everybody notices when they come in the building, he was a collector of Judaic items. And it was he that started our absolutely fabulous ceremonial cases. And in his travels, he would bring things back. He knew congregants were going somewhere, particularly in Europe. He would ask them to go to, I don't know what you would call them, antique stores, gift stores, and if they saw anything, would they bring it back? And almost every single item that is in the ceremonial case are donated. I do not believe Temple has purchased itself anything. These are all people who have, in their own families, have donated, or in their travels have seen it. And we have next to Cleveland, probably the largest ceremonial cases in the whole area.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen that, take a minute when we conclude here. As you leave the sanctuary, if you kind of walk straight ahead, you know, the exit will be on your right. If you walk a little bit past that, you'll see the ceremonial cases, and you're definitely invited to take a look at it. It's really impressive.
Yeah.
Me being, you know, I feel like relatively new to Temple. I've only been a member since 1995. But I think it's amazing. You mentioned the youth interfaith service. We're still doing that every year. I guess it's probably been about 60 years running on that, right?
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the first things that he did when he came. He had the idea, and the sisterhood and brotherhood, they all worked together on it. And when the guests would come, we could answer questions in, you know, before service, and if they want, you know, what's going to happen or that kind of thing. And then, as I said, when the service was over, he would explain what was the ark, the eternal light. Rabbi would just talk to anybody, answer all the questions. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, and what a great way to kind of, you know, share our differences and answer questions and probably correct a lot of misunderstandings about Judaism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you, Lois. Art, I'm going to move on to you now because after Rabbi Applebaum, probably our next significant rabbi was Rabbi Horowitz.
Oh, yeah.
And so, Art, can you talk some about kind of Rabbi Horowitz's involvement with the community, and that kind of leads into the things you've been involved with. So I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
Sure. Rabbi Horowitz was, if not the first president of the Akron Area Interfaith Council, he was among them. Back in those days, the Akron Area Interfaith Council was mostly led by clergy, where today it's almost the opposite, that it's lay-led. But he had a great deal of charisma, both within the congregation and outside. For many years, even after he retired, he was asked to speak at churches, and he has done that many, many times. He just has a wonderful personality. I think where we kind of came together, where Rabbi Horowitz and I met ideologically, was regarding social action, social justice. And that has been a key piece of my interest as I have gone through both where I was born and all the way up to the present time. We have a book that is called The Sayings of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, and there's a line in it that says, the world stands on three things: on Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, on worship, and on deeds of loving kindness. And if there's one of those 3 where we as individuals have an opportunity to make a difference, it's clearly in the area of the deeds of loving kindness. It's what I might call social action or social justice, and let me define the difference. We here at Temple have had a social action committee ever since I can remember. It's a big piece of the Reformed Jewish movement. And we have done mostly what I would call social action, which is typically food, clothing, and shelter. And we can work with our hands to help people, and it's a very key element of what we do, who we are. also have a national organization that is the Union for Reform Judaism. And the national organization helps the congregations in many ways. They provide prayer books. They also have a part of the group that is called the RAC. The RAC is the Religious Action Center, headquartered in Washington, D.C. The philosophy on a national level is very different from what we had been accustomed to here locally. On the national level, they're much more committed to social justice. Social justice being changing legislation to make major changes in society. The idea is, from a national level, we're never going to feed all the hungry. We're never going to take care of all the problems that people have on a day-to-day basis. But we can do things like the civil rights legislation was written in the national offices of the RAC. They have done many other pieces of legislation to affect society as a whole. And so social justice is really taking it to a different level. But both are important, and I would challenge anybody who says that one's right and the other's wrong, because they're not. They're both important. So locally, we have a social action committee, and the committee does a lot of things. We have a very strong reputation in the community for what we do with our group. We certainly do anything we can to help the marginalized, whether it's helping the food bank, clothing drives for children's services. We were involved with a group called Family Promise for homeless people. Mitzvah Day, and I'll talk more about that later, is a big piece of our social action program. We've worked with immigration, and immigration has been and continues to be a big issue. We also, as an outgrowth from what we do, the people that we meet, we have developed strong relationships with many other groups in the community, whether it's the African American community, the Islamic Society, the Catholic Commission. We have very strong ties to many other groups, and we can talk more about that later also. So Mike, I'll turn it back to you, and then I can come back later and talk about Mitzvah Day and other things.
Okay, good. Thank you, Art. Joelle. Joelle is got a very interesting role here, and I'd like her to share that with you. The fact that this is even happening, I think Joelle gets a lot of credit for that. So why don't you tell us how that happened?
Well, I'm very grateful to be on the panel. I was asked through a mutual friend and business owner in Akron to be a part of the Akron200 celebration and contributing some commemorative artwork for the city. So if any of you are familiar with the Akron200 website, there's a merch link on the site, and I'm responsible for putting together some of the artwork on that. So I was working with Mark Greer, and at the same time, I was also asked to be on the history committee at Temple. And at that time, I just felt like what an exciting thing that Akron is celebrating its bicentennial year, and Temple Israel is celebrating 160 years. And that we've come together as a committee at this time to celebrate it. So it just felt like a natural kind of connection to make, and I got Mike and his wife Joyce, who's also been a Temple president before, to talk to Mark and help organize this event. But I've been so excited to be in this role creatively, and I think that's why I was asked to be on the committee to begin with. because I feel like I've been so blessed to sit here and listen to these stories, and hear it from Lois and from Harvey, and to hear about Temple's history and all of these things that we've been unearthing that some of us didn't know. And as a visual artist, I'm thinking, how can we bring our congregation back into that world and understand how we've come to where we are today? And we've had a really fun time kind of figuring out how to do that. So, part of my job has been about creating visual elements to kind of speak to our temple's history, and it's something that we're working on putting up and on permanent display. But we also last year had this really fun program where we did a throwback service in our old temple on Merriman Road, and it was just such a neat program because Lois told us that for the services, the women used to come wearing gloves, and they would serve food and drinks, and so we brought out platters. Yeah, they wore hats. So we just thought that would be fun to kind of reincorporate some of those things. So we all dressed up as in throwback outfits for the service.
Yeah, the throwback, by the way, was circa 1945. So picture what the fashions were then.
That was a lot of fun. And Lois had a cookbook that she shared with us that we were able to pull some recipes from, and then we served some of those appetizers at the event, which was such a neat way to kind of pull everything back from that era.
Even the service. The service
Oh,
was
yeah,
all
yeah.
classical reform service.
Which means it was mostly English. Joelle, even though she's a lot younger than us, has a big thing in common with Temple, with Temple, I'm sorry, with Lois, is Joelle is also a lifetime member from birth. So even though there's a lot of years in difference, you've both grown up with Temple. Kind of seen different things, you've come from different places. So Joelle, I don't know if your sense is, do you have a sense of a lot of changes happening at Temple, like from your experience, or not?
Yeah.
Obviously Lois does.
Yeah. I have a lot of fond memories of being in Merriman Road, and it was a big change to move from that Highland Square area to here. And I remember hearing about it because this used to be an old roller skating rink, and I was like, how are they going to make it a place of worship? But they've done such a beautiful job, and actually, my husband and I were the very first wedding to happen in the new temple.
And that's a fact.
And the stained glass windows are from the temple, from Merriman Road.
Yeah, we took those from Merriman Road. And the old building, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, it's at 133 Merriman. Tony Troppi, a very, very creative developer in town, purchased it, and it's now called HUG Center. So it's kind of a multi-purpose building now. It's a center for the arts. He's actually built some apartments in there. Tony is really, truly a creative mind, and he kind of translates that creativity into real estate. So we couldn't have been more pleased that our old building, after 101 years, still has a very useful and vibrant use in Akron. So thank you. Art, because I know we're starting to get to our time limit. You mentioned Mitzvah Day. Mitzvah Day is really kind of one of our flagship programs, I'd say, for social action and really for Temple in general. So why don't you tell the audience about just how it started and what we do?
Sure. In 1991, there was a rabbi in Washington, D.C., at Washington Hebrew, which was then a congregation of about 5,000 families. Today, it's a little bit over 2,000 families, so that tells you what's happened over time. But his name was Rabbi Bruce Lustig, and he observed, which I'm sure any of us would observe in our own congregations, that there are some people who come twice a year to services. And he wanted to see if he could get them to come a little bit more than that. So he came up with an idea, which he called Mitzvah Day. Mitzvah literally means commandment, but it's interpreted to mean good deed. So Mitzvah Day, they had a committee that worked all around the clock for the year and put together a number of projects that congregants could go and volunteer at the food bank. They could volunteer at the battered women's shelter. They could help people in the community. And they had many different projects, and with that number of people in the congregation, they had no problem getting these projects filled, and it was a big success. And at that time, we had biennial conventions of Reformed Jews from all over North America, not just the United States, but Canada as well. And the temple president from here in Akron was listening to a seminar at one of these biennial conventions and heard about what happened and what was going on in Washington, D.C., and she brought the idea back here to Akron. So Elaine Jaffe was the president at the time, and Rabbi Lipper was the rabbi here. And between the two of them, they also realized that we are not 5,000 families. Maybe back then we were closer to 600 or 700 families, and where today we're about maybe 350. So we knew back in 2002, when Mitzvah Day started here in Akron, that we didn't have enough people here in our congregation to make it a viable program. So we reached out to 4 other congregations, and we started Mitzvah Day as an interfaith project here at Temple. That has grown, incidentally, to about 20 congregations and roughly 20 projects that we do now. So it evolved over time, and there was a time when one of the members of our committee was from St. Hilary's, and he asked if I would go and meet with Father Steve. And here I was a little bit nervous walking in to talk to the priest from a congregation of well over 1,000 families, and it was really a very good conversation. And he asked me a question that kind of I wasn't prepared for, but he said, we have a Lenten series, and during Lent they would have maybe 3 or 4 weeks speakers on Wednesday nights. And would Temple Israel be interested in joining for the Lenten series? So we did, and that series grew to 5 congregations now, including 2 African American congregations, St. Hilary's, Faith Lutheran that's right next door, and us. And it has been a terrific program where we've talked about a lot of different topics over the years, whether it's been immigration or racism. This year we're going to be talking about food deserts, which I think is a very good topic. But what's important here is that it helped us to develop relationships with other people outside of the congregation, and I really feel that's incredibly important, that we need that, and we want to have good relationships with others outside of our congregation. So then move forward to the present day, and we are in conversation with a church in Hudson that is more than 1,000 families, First Congregational Church. They have a program that they call First Serve, which I will say, I'll brag a little bit here, we were first, but they have done a tremendous job of doing something very similar to Mitzvah Day. And so this year we have decided to help each other. And we'll work with them and they'll work with us, and we'll make both programs a little bigger. They have focused, incidentally, strictly on North Hill. Even though they're from Hudson, everything they do with 600 or 700 people is focused on the North Hill area, and they really do a good job. So that brings us up to the present day, and we are starting the process for Mitzvah Day 2026, and anybody who wants to help, please let us know.
Great. And I'm going to wrap up the panel portion of this by saying, so you could hear from Art just all the community programs that we're involved with, how many different congregations around town we work with. And that's always been a big part of Temple Israel Akron. And I can demonstrate this by some research we've done. And Lois, this goes back way before your time. Actually, in the year 1905, okay? So think about 1905. Akron was rapidly growing. The rubber industry was really starting to explode. Temple was at the High Street Temple still. They hadn't moved to Merriman Road yet. Our rabbi at the time was named Rabbi Philo. Rabbi Philo in 1905 was incredibly involved in the community and was a real advocate for the working man. So this was a time really before unions were strong. And he actually became the regular speaker at the annual Labor Day picnic in Akron. So Rabbi Philo, okay, so a Jew in a rapidly growing city where there weren't a lot of Jewish people. Because he was such a eloquent advocate for working people, they invited him every year. In fact, at one point they even asked him if he'd be interested in running for mayor. He didn't. But just to show you, even back then, okay, even with a much smaller congregation, Temple Israel, part of what we do has always been community involvement. So it was true in 1905, it's true in 2025. So I think we've kind of concluded our panel portion of the program. So looks like Mark has a pretty good stack of questions there, which we will attempt to tackle. Thank you. Got to put on my glasses for this. Okay, here's an interesting question. All right, this will be, I think this can be for anyone on the panel. You mentioned the first two waves of Jewish immigration to Akron, but I'm curious if Akron saw many Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union in the 1990s, like Cleveland did.
Yes, we did. I don't know, Joelle was old enough to know, but I know Art was. Yes, there were several Jewish families that came to town. And use the mic. Okay. Okay, yeah. There were several Jewish families that came to town. The Temple, Bethel, and Anchesfard, the Orthodox congregation, worked with the Jewish Center for their placement. And then I can remember there were several families that did join Temple. Some are still, thank goodness, with us. And the children learned English. I remember telling one mother who said, my daughter doesn't know English. And I said, don't worry about it. She will learn. And she did. And married and became very successful. So the Jewish community did help the Soviet Jews that came. We found apartments. There was a woman that lived here who said, if anybody had furniture that they didn't need anymore, I can store it in my garage. And then we would go over and go through Mrs. Greenberg's garage and pick out furniture for the different apartments. We made sure they had food, they had pots, pans, everything. And Temple was a big part of that. And there are still several families that did come from the Soviet Union who still belong to Temple.
Interesting. Okay. How has the Jewish community helped advance civil rights in Akron?
That's art.
Yeah.
Could I briefly offer something?
Yeah,
I was
please.
trying to learn more about Rabbi Applebaum and saw that he led co-led a march in protest for the violence in Selma against civil rights workers, along with some of the Christian churches in town. But I guess he figured prominently in there. That's just one thing I happened to come across.
Thanks, Skip.
Mike, do you want to repeat that? Because Skip didn't.
What?
Mike, can you say it into your mic what Skip said?
Oh. Was everybody able to hear what Skip just offered?
No.
Just to repeat into your microphone what Skip shared.
No, I'll just give the microphone to Skip.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought.
No, you're not interrupting.
But regarding civil rights, I found that Rabbi Applebaum had co-led a march in 1965 of protest in Akron against the violence promulgated towards civil rights protesters in Selma, Alabama at the time. He was featured in an article in the newspaper.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So I go back to something I said earlier about relationships, that relationships are the key to moving forward in many different ways. But when it comes to civil rights, I think the fact that we have a very strong tie with Prince of Peace, with New Hope, and we have done some work with House of the Lord. It's more the what we do and how we do it. At Mitzvah Day, we had a program, I think 2 years ago, where we really focused on gun violence. And then last year, we had a panel of African American students from here in Akron that spoke about their own personal experiences with gun violence. And quite honestly, it opened the eyes of a lot of people who were in the audience who didn't realize what really goes on here in our own city. But it's important that we learn and that we know what's going on, and also that we know people that we can turn to, especially when there are times of problems. We've had prayer vigils. We've had many different things that we have done. But it really centers back on relationships.
Okay, this is a multi-part question, but I think it's really interesting. So, what originally brought Jewish people to Akron? So, we talked about that a little bit before. The earliest Jewish immigrants here came mostly from Germany and Hungary, tended to be merchants, peddlers. So, I mean, my interpretation of that is they came for economic reasons,
Yeah.
to better themselves.
In my family's case, somebody my father was from Poland, born in Poland, and somebody in his town, or his shtetl, came to Akron and sent word back, and pretty soon the whole shtetl moved to Akron because everybody knew somebody, and they're working okay, and that's how a lot of them came.
Right. So the next part of this question is when it gets interesting. Any persecution issues in the 1880s? It's like, oh, you bet. And that's really, and this is not just an Akron story, but it's really an American Jewish story. That's when millions, literally millions of Jews came to America, fleeing persecution from Eastern Europe, mostly Russian. Borders were, ever shifting back then in Europe. But the czars of that time were absolutely anti-Semitic. And so the Jews really came to America for their freedom. Okay, they were, if you want to use the word refugees, that was really the driving force, just to make a life, period. Not necessarily, to better themselves economically. So that was a big difference, I think, in the waves of immigration from 1840s, 1850s Germany to 1880s, 1890s, 1900 Eastern Europe. They were absolutely fleeing persecution.
Now in Akron, I was not around then, but in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan in Akron was very, very large. And so I don't know about discrimination for the Jews at that point in time. But I do know that growing up, Jews were not allowed in several areas to live in Akron. Fairlawn Heights was a no-no. Silver Lake was just, you just didn't even think about going there. The country clubs were restricted, and very frankly, that's why Rosemont Country Club was formed, because the Jews could not join Portage Country Club or Fairlawn Country Club.
Right.
So there were problems.
Yeah, so you kind of anticipated the third question there, Lois. Accepted well by other people in Akron.
It was difficult, but I don't know, maybe our parents they didn't let us know about it. You found it out later as we were more adults. But as children, they were very protective.
Right. Art and Joelle, any comment on that from your experiences in terms of accepting Jews in the community?
What about you living in Portage Lake?
Yeah, I grew up in a town that was not predominantly or really Jewish at all, and I did grow up with a decent amount of anti-Semitism at the time. Yeah, it's hard to navigate, and it's actually one of the reasons my family has chosen to move closer to the center of Akron for more of a community, because it's really, really hard being a minority.
Okay. All right, so Lois, this one I think is for you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
only because I'm older.
Asking about West High School.
Oh,
Did it have a large Jewish population in the early 1900s?
yes, West High School did have because there was no Buchtel High School. So the Jews either went to West or I think South High School were the two. But I know that my mother went to West High School. And if anybody, and the principal at the time my mother was in school, does anybody know Martin Real Estate? Mr. E.L. Martin was the principal of West High School when my mother was there. And does anybody remember the commercials with Jess White, who was I think in the Maytag Man?
Yeah.
He went to West High School. And yeah, he went to West High School. And there were a couple others that I can't right now remember, but it was the high school that if you lived on the west side of town, you went to West High School.
She's amazing. She remembers everything. It's every single time we sit down for one of these committees, it is just like I'm in awe. I walk away with just such interesting history. I feel like I've learned a lot here tonight. And I've been on the committee since the beginning.
Okay, here's an interesting question. I think this can be for all of us. Please tell us more about your youth interfaith programs, the benefits to Temple and to their futures.
Well, we did not have youth interfaith because that came with Rabbi Applebaum, and I was already, had started college when he came. So there was very little mixing with any kind of, if you were, I went to Buchtel, and the Jewish kids all knew each other, and they all stuck together. And the non-Jewish kids had their groups. And every once in a while, there would be one or two kids, the Jewish kids that would be with the non-Jewish kids. Not a lot, but we knew who they were, and the Jewish kids didn't want to go with the, it was just two worlds. And that was at Buchtel.
Mhm. So Joel, while you were growing up here, you got to see some of those youth interfaith programs. Any thoughts from that?
I don't know. I can't recall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Art?
So I think from the rabbi's point of view, it was always, especially the first year or two that a rabbi was here, it was a challenge. The people in the audience would try to put the rabbi on the spot and ask him questions. Instead of a sermon, he just entertained questions. So typically, some of the questions you could predict. What are all these things on the walls and what do they mean?
The little hat you're wearing.
And so, yeah, so there were certain basic questions that the rabbi could easily be prepared. But over time, it really did challenge the rabbi's creativity, how to handle that. And I will say that I think all of the rabbis we've had have done a very good job with it, because you can't take offense to somebody's question. It's got to be, somebody's asking a question because they want to know the answer. So they have really done a credible job of answering those questions. And I think it's very important to I keep coming back to the same word, relationships, that it's important that the rabbi can communicate with people and answer questions. And I think the people who come to these are always impressed and learn something. So it's a very positive experience.
Mhm. Definitely. Here's an interesting question. Is there a cemetery set aside for Jewish people?
Yes. Yes. There are, on South Street, at the, I forget where you can get on the highway, but on South Street and
It's near Summit Lake.
near Summit Lake, that is the first Jewish cemetery in town. And there is a Civil War veteran buried in that cemetery. And I don't know of any burials there in the last several years, but there are plots available if somebody wants one. There is a cemetery which we call Sherbandi Hill, which is off of Worcester Avenue and Diagonal Road, up in that area. There's a very large Jewish cemetery. And it has families from many, many years. And it's been used more recently, particularly the Russians have used that cemetery. And it's very interesting if you go there because I don't know how to explain it, but when Russians put up their tombstones, there are pictures and designs on the tombstones, which you don't normally see in a Jewish cemetery. But the Russian Jews have done that. There is a combination of like 3 cemeteries that are out on what we call Swartz Road, which is off of Main Street. And if you know where Holy Cross Cemetery is, you can get to Swartz Road by going past Holy Cross Cemetery. And one is dedicated for the congregants of Anchesfard, which is Orthodox. There is one there was a Hebrew congregation in town at one time called a Hafizetic, and they have a section, their own little cemetery. And then there was another Jewish group in town called Workman's Circle, and they have a section. And all three, you can just go down the road and 1, 2, 3, there. And there is a section in Glendale Cemetery that is a dedicated Jewish area. And then Rose Hill is predominantly used by members of Bethel and Temple Israel. So,
Got a lot of places to get buried if
a lot of
if you're
places.
Jewish.
yeah.
Okay, we got time for one or two more. This is an interesting one. How did the implementation of the inner belt, which has been, certainly in the news a lot
Yeah.
lately, affect the Jewish community?
By the time the inner belt came in, most of the Jews had left that Worcester Avenue area or foresaw that it was coming, and the businesses had closed. So there may have been one or two left. I think Charlatans Pharmacy, which was at Rhodes Avenue, I think that was there for a while. And the Safersteins had their grocery store on Worcester Avenue. And I think with the inner belt, that was the end of the pharmacy and the end of Saferstein's grocery stores.
Okay, final question. Can you recommend any good books to learn more about Akron's Jewish history?
Yes, I didn't bring it with me. Yes, unfortunately. There is a book that was put out about, 25 years ago maybe, when the center was doing their big anniversary. And I think it's Jews in Akron, and it was written together with a woman, we call her Bunny Rose, if you know who Bunny is, and Arlene Rawson. It is excellent. It is wonderful. And it has pictures and pictures and stories and stories. And I just happened to find out you can get it on Amazon for $24.95. And that was because I was researching out of the book and a picture.
Okay.
But it is excellent, and it is it does Akron. In fact, a lot of the information that I got that I could talk about tonight is from that book.
The other thing I'll mention, it's not a book, but this is something we discovered in our research, and you can do an internet search on this from the Summit County Library.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody, this goes back into the late 70s, actually did their PhD dissertation on the Jewish history of Akron.
Oh, yes. That's
Helga Kaplan.
Helga Kaplan, yes.
It's available for free online, no pictures. And it's written, in a little bit more of an academic way, but it is absolutely chock full of information. And she did a lot of original research
Yes.
for this. I mean, there's citations from just dozens and dozens of interviews with people. So if you really want to dig a little deeper into Akron Jewish history, I would suggest just that too. That'll take you up to about 1978.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An interesting book that Rabbi Applebaum wrote is What Everyone Needs to Know About Judaism or something, and I wondered if it came after he started the questions at his services by young people.
That's
But it's a wonderful book.
yeah, I've got a copy of that.
Yeah, yes, and also, that book was also printed in Japanese, I think. I think that book something was done with Japan with Rabbi Applebaum's book. Yeah, that I know too.
It's a wonderful book, very informative.
And a small book, and it answers all the kind of questions you might want to know in about a little paragraph.
And the questions that aren't in there, Lois can answer for you. So,
No, not all of them.
All right, so I think that concludes our comments and questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and all of our panelists. What a great history forum. We are so happy to have had this, and there's no better time to have talked more about this subject. We are so grateful for our friends and partners at WAOH TV who have recorded tonight's history forum, and it will be rebroadcast in the coming weeks. We will certainly let all of you know that. Joelle mentioned that earlier, but if you haven't already, please visit our bicentennial website, Akron200.org. While the year is coming to an end, we have quite a sprint to the finish line and still a good number of events left on our calendar. You can also pick up your official bicentennial merchandise, of which Joelle did the design for our Akron200 t-shirts. And if you have one of those, yes, if you have one of those, they are the most stylish thing that will ever be in your closet. So be sure to, again, visit Akron200.org. A few other announcements coming up are we have a history forum on November 18th on the Beyond the Inner Belt, which is urban renewal in Akron. That's, again, November 18th, and that's going to be at the library downtown at 6 p.m. December 3rd, we mentioned that earlier, about the Akron Bicentennial Concert. Theron Brown will be on that concert, Jocelyn Grant, and we'll be doing an arrangement of Ruby Nash Garnett's #1 hit, Our Day Will Come. Ruby Nash is 91. She still lives here in Akron, so we're hopefully going to have her at that concert with the Akron Symphony Orchestra. That's at E.J. Thomas at 7 p.m. December 6th, which is Akron's actual 200th anniversary date, we will have our closing ceremony at 1 p.m., and that will be at Perkins Square right outside Akron Children's Hospital. That's where it all began for Akron, so 1 p.m. And then December 9th, we have another Forgotten History Forum on the history of the African American Church, which will be at historic Wesley Temple. So again, visit Akron200.org. We do have another question as well.
Will the video of this be accessible from your website as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
It'll be accessible on our website as well as at WAOH TV as well. Okay. So again, visit our website. We have a number of other events there on our calendar as well, and we look forward to seeing all of you at our upcoming events, which are all free, by the way. We always mention that. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to Temple Israel Akron.
Thank you.